Hey folks, Nathan here. Welcome back to Nate's Favorite Deck Building Games. We continue our look with Marvel Legendary this time, except instead of looking at a heroic set, we are continuing from last episode and looking at one of the villainous sets. We had Legendary Villains last time, which was a new core set that lets you play as the bad guys against the good guys. So far, there's really only been one expansion that focuses on the same theme of evil against good rather than the other way around, and that's what we look at this time. From 2015, the small expansion, Fear Itself. As always, we have ourselves a new rule supplement here. It does delve into some of the key terms like demolish that appeared in the villains game, just in case you got this and you're integrating it into a heroic game. It integrates better with villains, but just like villains can integrate with the heroic sets as well. You just got to be aware of equivalent terminology. We went into that last episode. There's not really very much in this pack. We have the Uru Enchanted Iron Man as the one commander, which in the other games would be called a mastermind, in this set. So we have his commander card and 4 commander tactics that'd be face down underneath him when he's sitting in the commander pile. We have 3 new plot twists. They are The Traitor, Fear Itself, roll credits, right? And Last Stand at Avengers Tower. You would have one of these, or one of the ones from the original Villains game, sitting up there in your plot slot. There's no new backup adversary groups, but we do have one new adversary group, which, again, in the original game would have been the villains, the ones that can go in the adversary stack over here. We have the Mighty, which includes, in this case, again, 8 cards, representing Spider-Man, Wolverine, Black Widow, Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Iron Fist, Ms. Marvel, and Red She-Hulk, for those who are curious. They'd be somewhere shuffled into that adversary's deck. Then this set also gives us 6 new allies. One of them has a Hydra team icon affiliation, that is Scotty. The rest then have the Foes of Asgard affiliation. We have Grythought, that's how you're supposed to say it, Breaker of Wills. Then we have Skirn, Breaker of Men. We have Kurth, Breaker of Stone. See a pattern forming here. We have Nurkad, Breaker of Oceans. Not sure how you break water, but whatever. And then Null, Breaker of Worlds. Now this set does use the demolish keyword that was used back in the villain set, but nowhere else up to that point. Again, if something says to demolish, it means pull the top card off the ally deck, look at its cost, stick it back at the bottom of the deck, and then whoever it's telling you to demolish has to reveal their hand and discard, not KO, just discard, a card from their hand with that same cost. It might say demolish all players and that's everyone, or it might say demolish and specify a player, such as the player to your right. Now, before we get to the new mechanics here, I would point out that when it comes with compatibility with those heroic sets, there are a couple of tweaks that are mentioned here that aren't mentioned in the original Villains rulebook. So, just in case you're playing with this without the Villain set, you might find that you don't have some of the cards the Villain set includes, like, say, Madam Hydra. So basically, if a card lets you gain a Madam Hydra, which would be sitting down here, instead you get a Shield Officer if you're playing with the original base set, because that's what will be sitting there as an always available card. If a card effect would cause you to gain a new recruit, which would be over here, instead you just get +1 attack, which is basically what that would wind up doing for you before it goes back into the stack, though you would be able to draw a card as well. If a card effect mentions bindings, you use the wounds instead. If a card mentions something about the Hydra team, you use the Shield team instead. But those are only if you're playing with the heroic base set and Fear Itself. If you're playing with the villain set as your base set, then no, those terms in many cases like bindings and wounds are not equivalent. Because if you were to combine base set with base set, you'd actually have both of them out there and they do different things. Consider that sort of a stopgap measure that they included in these instructions just to make sure those who bought Fear Itself, not realizing that it better integrated with villains than it did with the other sets, could still be able to play with Fear Itself. Now there's 2 new main mechanics in this set. We have Thrown Artifacts and Uru Enchanted Weapons. Let's start looking at Thrown Artifacts. Okay, so for instance, Scotty here, who could be recruited from the lair for 7 is a thrown artifact. Now we saw artifacts previously show up in the Guardians of the Galaxy small expansion. And an artifact was basically a card that works kind of like a construct in Ascension in that when you play it, it sits on your side of the table, having an ongoing type of effect. This is similar, but not exactly the same. Yes, it sits there like a construct, just waiting for you to use it, but it's not one that has an effect every turn. Instead, to have an effect whenever you want, because it's just sitting there almost like an arsenal ready for you to use on a future turn, you must quote-unquote throw that artifact. Okay? To throw the artifact means to get its ability and then stick it on the bottom of your deck. Not your discard pile, the bottom of your deck, so it comes around faster again than if it would have been in your discard pile. Kind of like Thor's hammer, right? It's sitting there ready to use, then he throws it, and yeah, it's going to take a minute to come back, but it will eventually come back faster than if it was in the discard pile. He's thrown Mjolnir, and now it's come back to him to use again. So, similar to artifacts, just not an ongoing effect, just an effect you can hold on to in front of you for later, that comes back fairly quickly. Now, some of the adversaries in this set are pretty rough to deal with, because they have those Uru enchanted weapons. Okay, so for instance, maybe I'm trying to fight Spider-Man from the Mighty. It says at the top, 2 Uru enchanted weapons. Now, what does that mean? Okay, in this case, it says 2 Uru enchanted weapons. However many enchanted weapons it tells you he has, 1 in many cases, 2 in other cases tends to be a little bit more than norm. Then what you do is you reveal that many cards from the top of the adversary deck, which of course at the time will be face down. And the foe that you're fighting is going to wind up getting an attack rating increase, not based on the number of cards that you just drew, but the victory points on all the cards you just drew. So he may be sitting here with an attack rating of 2, but he's got 2 Uru enchanted weapons, so if it turns out that the 2 cards that I reveal from the top of the adversary's deck before I shuffle them and just stick them on the bottom out of the way, maybe one of them had a victory points of 3 and the other one had a victory points of 2, holy crap, he is now attack rating 7 when he only looked like 2 in the first place. I only spent 2, or was planning to spend 2 to be able to attack him. Now that I am attacking him, he's rating 7. If I don't have at least 7 attack built up, I can't defeat him. But even if I fail, I've still spent those attack points and can't go after him again this same turn. And many times, these adversaries that have the Uru enchanted weapons have a special way of putting the key term here. Instead of it just saying fight, it says fight or fail, which means whatever it is happens regardless of whether you actually defeat him or you don't wind up with enough points to beat that Uru enhanced increased attack value. Sorry, you're still having the effect because you engaged them right then. That is why, by the way, you get the asterisk there, right? Because it always reminds you to check and see if the rating has changed based on the text. In this case, it'd be affected by the 2 or however many Uru enchanted weapons. So, not a lot of new mechanics here for Fear itself, but it does give us some more things to build upon the Villains base set, if that's the base set that you prefer to play with. Don't have a lot of options for changing that one up without having to deal with the conflicting terminology, so you might as well add in Fear itself for a little bit more play value. And kind of cool that we now see something that uses the artifact concept that we got back in Guardians of the Galaxy with those Infinity Stones or Infinity Gems, only in this case working a little bit differently because they have to be thrown, quote-unquote, put on the bottom of the deck in order to be used. Otherwise, plays pretty much the same as Villains, which of course, as we said, aside from some alternate terminology and a few new mechanics, more or less plays like the regular Heroic base set. For now, that wraps up our look at any of these villain-centric versions, because there just aren't any other ones to look at. But of course, if any new ones are released, we will take a look at them later. Next time, we take a look at the other releases from 2015, 2 new large sets, Secret Wars Volume 1 and Secret Wars Volume 2.